Greetings and welcome to the Introduction to Astronomy. In this week's exploration of the solar system, we will talk about the Messenger spacecraft and its exploration of the planet Mercury. So let's get started here. And what we know about Messenger? Well, it was launched on August 3rd of 2004. And then traveled to Mercury in a roundabout orbit. Takes a little while to get into Mercury because you have to use gravitational assists from other planets. So it orbited from March of 2011 until April of 2015. And we can see a little bit of its path here that it took, so that it had a flyby of Earth, a couple flybys of Venus, and several flybys of Mercury over that time period, over the nearly 7 years it took to get into Mercury. Now, what was the purpose of this? Well, the purpose was to map and study Mercury. Now, unlike most of the other planets, this was only the second time this planet had been visited. The first time was the Mariner 10 spacecraft in 1975. So that was the only time it had ever been visited by a spacecraft. And this gives us a chance to actually map the entire surface, which was a key part of its mission, as well as looking at things like the geologic history, the magnetic field, and other properties of the planet. So we're able to see, because of this, images of Mercury that are much more detailed than what we had previously. And here is an example of one of them, which does look a lot like our own moon. We'll note that it doesn't have the lighter and darker areas to distinguish different parts the way our moon does. But other than that, it does have a resemblance to our moon in being a very dry and airless world that has that is loaded with craters, many impact craters, and we can see a lot of those right there, especially on the left-hand side of the image. Now, I said it's a very dry planet, but it does have water. So it did find some water in the thin atmosphere of Mercury. Now, Mercury really does not have much of an atmosphere, but there is some water in it, which is very interesting and was an unusual finding. We found water on Mercury. Now, water is not necessarily liquid water. Remember, water can come in various forms. Water can be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. Well, a liquid water could not exist on Mercury because you need an atmosphere to have a sufficient pressure for water to be a liquid. However, it can be a solid, ice, or it can be a gas. And we did find solid water in craters up in near the northern pole of Mercury, and we can see some of them highlighted here in false color, the yellow showing deposits of water that are there. Now, how do these manage to exist on Mercury? Well, that's because they are completely shielded. They are craters that are continuously in shadow, and therefore never see direct sunlight. So that protects them from being overly heated and vaporizing that water and turning it into a gas, which would then be able to escape from Mercury over time. They also found evidence of volcanic activity on Mercury. So we see Mercury dominated by impact craters, but there's also been some volcanic activity on it at some point in the past. Now, finally, in April of 2015, and in fact on April 30th, the craft crashed into Mercury. That was the end of its mission, and it had run out of maneuvering fuel to be able to keep its orbit stable. And once that was done, it could no longer keep pointed toward Earth and keep its orbit stable, and therefore it crashed into Mercury. So we have technically landed on Mercury, at least we've crashed a craft into Mercury. And following up on Messenger, there is a craft now known as Bepi Colombo, which is on its way and scheduled to enter Mercury's orbit at the end of next year. That would be the end of 2026. So let's finish up with our summary, and what we've looked at today would be that Messenger was the first craft to study Mercury since Mariner 10 back in the mid-1970s. It orbited Mercury for about 4 years and discovered water and organic compounds on Mercury. So that concludes this week's exploration of the solar system on the Messenger spacecraft. We'll be back again next week for another exploration of the solar system video. So until then, have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in class.